Today from the global lane, Iran nuclear talks resume in Europe. Will the lifting of sanctions stop Iran from going nuclear?
Iran is on the precipice of a nuclear weapon, and I think that once they get it, they're not going to go back out of that Pandora's box.
The Islamic State expands its global reach, unleashing terror in Uganda.
All they want to do is kill.
Rejecting the not guilty verdict, Arizona State students want Kyle Rittenhouse banned from the university.
A lot of these students are just willfully ignorant on this. It was clearly self-defense.
And two trials, two different outcomes. Why the family of this pastor killed in a crash brought a courtroom to tears. And it's all right here on the global lane. After a 5-month-long pause, nuclear talks with Iran resumed in Vienna this week. The United States participated indirectly. Iran says several preconditions must be met before it agrees to hold direct negotiations with the U.S. So how likely is it that the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that agreement, may be salvaged? Or is it back to the drawing board? Well, joining us to share some insights is Greg Roman, director of the Middle East Forum. Greg, it's always good to talk with you. So the initial round of resumed talks in Vienna have concluded. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about renewed efforts to finally get Iran to back off from developing a nuclear weapon?
I'm extremely pessimistic about the results of the European broker talks in Vienna. On day one of the negotiations, which started this past Monday, we saw that Iran was asking for immediate lifting of all Western sanctions, specifically American sanctions against Iran, in exchange for almost nothing. And the scenario we're looking at right now is that Iran is going to get better caps on their nuclear program for almost complete relief from the West, which I would deem a complete loss for our efforts to limit their nuclear program.
And Iran isn't allowing visual monitoring of any of its nuclear development sites, and the government has stockpiled 16 times the enriched uranium levels that are allowed under the 2015 JCPOA. Also, the Islamic Republic admits it now is producing uranium metal. That's only needed for building a nuclear bomb, so not for peaceful purposes. So what do you make of those actions?
I think they're on the threshold of a nuclear weapon breakout capability, where beforehand it may have been a year. Now they could probably develop an improvised weapon within a month. And in doing so, the IAEA keeps on reporting on the increase in their enriched uranium stockpiles at an ever-growing level, which brings them closer to that breakout capability. And I think once the Iranians get it, it's not just going to be located in a centralized nuclear site like Isfahan, Shiraz, the Bashir nuclear reactor. They have their program divided between hundreds of different sites. And those are the sites that we know about. So as they increase their production and the West keeps on quibbling and basically dribbling over their negotiations team in Vienna, Iran is on the precipice of a nuclear weapon. And I think that once they get it, they're not going to go back out of that Pandora's box.
And you don't really believe they're going to reverse course. You believe that they are determined to have a nuclear weapon, aren't you?
I believe that they're determined to have the capability to develop a nuclear weapon in a very short time frame. Whether they develop one and don't test it, whether they feel like they get to the point where they have to test it as a sign to the West, I really think that Iran right now on its nuclear program is seeing it as the only card it has to play in terms of being able to get sanctions relief. They've tried attacking Gulf shipping. They've tried to escalate the war in Yemen. They even tried to carry out a terror attack against Israeli targets in New Delhi. There was another attempt in the Philippines. There was another attempt in Colombia. But all of that hasn't worked. So right now, if they don't get what they want in Vienna, they're going to be on that path to the weapon.
Okay, now you had mentioned the sanctions. Iran wants the U.S. to unfreeze about $10 billion in assets, also guarantees from the U.S. that it won't impose or restore sanctions or withdraw from the nuclear deal again. So should the Biden administration agree to any of those demands, how could they guarantee that the U.S. wouldn't withdraw again? I mean, what if Trump or another president that shares Trump's views wins the White House in the future?
I think that the approach to the Iran nuclear negotiations is a binary issue. Sanctions relief for putting a freeze on the nuclear program is the wrong approach. If the United States wants to have a successful negotiation, they will raise all of the issues of Iran's malign activities in the Middle East, including their nuclear program, but not limited to their ballistic missile capability, not limited to their support of non-state actors, which are agitating against American allies, and their sponsorship of different regimes, whether it be Yemen, whether it be Syria, whether it be their other activities where they're trying to cater influence, especially in Iraq now after the attempted assassination of the Iraqi prime minister. And if the U.S. brings all of those cards, if each of those issues are addressed, that might be enough to permit sanctions relief.
Okay, now Israel warns it won't hesitate to destroy Iranian nuclear reactors if necessary, just like they did years ago in Iraq and Syria. We all know that Iran has said it wants to destroy Israel. Israel says it won't allow Iran to catch the world by surprise with a nuclear weapon like Kim Jong-un did in North Korea. So give us a prediction, Greg, on these talks. How likely is it that Iran will reverse course, or do you think Israel will be forced to take unilateral military action?
I think Iran is in the position of power right now, externally, where they're able to have all the cards as it relates to their nuclear program in Vienna. But Israel has a plan B rather than just carrying out an attack on Iran's nuclear installations. You can destroy something, but you can also build something. One thing that's irreversible in Iran is the existential crisis that they're facing with their water management issues, the ability for them to have national infrastructure systems which are consistently under cyber attack, and more than anything, a population that day by day keeps on revolting against the regime. So if you're looking for a successful solution here for a long-term problem, for a long-term solution to Iran's nuclear program, it starts in Iran, not in the U.S., not in Vienna, and not in Jerusalem. Beyond that, you'll have a tit-for-tat attack. The Iranians will build again. The Israelis will destroy. And until you have regime change in Iran, that's the only way you'll get a finite end to the nuclear program.
Okay, that's what it's all about. We'll see what develops. Greg Roman, director of the Middle East Forum. Thank you, Greg, for sharing your time and insights with us.
Thank you, Gary.
It didn't end with the defeat of the Syrian Caliphate. The Islamic State is expanding its global reach, and now into East Africa. Several bombings this fall in Uganda put that nation on notice. Islamic militants are coming for you. The Allied Democratic Forces, an IS-affiliated group based in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, claimed responsibility for the recent suicide attacks in Kampala. It's the worst violence in Uganda since the days of Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army, and before that, during the rule of Idi Amin in the 1970s. Well, joining us is a man who knows the region well. He actually lives in Uganda and runs orphanages and businesses there. You may know him as the machine gun preacher. He's missionary to Africa, Sam Childers. Sam, it's always good to see you and talk with you. So what do you make of this uptick in Islamic extremism and terrorism in Uganda? Why now?
I tell you what, I believe that the reason why the UPDF has literally took over and took back Somalia. So the war that was there, there's a very big presence of the UPDF, and I believe that the Islamic State is trying to get back at the country there in Uganda. It all started October 24th was the first bombing. It actually went off in a restaurant. A lot of people were injured. There was only one person that got killed that day. But right now, you never know when something's going to happen. I mean, they have stopped several suicide bombings, thank God on it. I did send you a video that was taken from the field. It's just unbelievable. I can't even understand people why they would want to harm somebody like they're doing. And they don't even care if it's another Muslim. I mean, these people just, they're almost cowardless, thoughtless, loveless people. All they want to do is kill. And it reminds me of Joseph Kony.
Well, what are they after, Sam? What do they want?
You know, I believe that they just want to try to take over the country. I believe that they want to put a threat there so maybe they can get some leeway. But one thing that I know the president of Uganda, and he knows how to handle these guys very serious.
This Allied Democratic Forces group, it may be harder for the Ugandan military to defeat a terrorist organization than it did an actual militia like Joseph Kony's LRA. So how great is the threat, in your opinion, in the long term? What might it mean for the Ugandan people? And do you think more terrorism ahead?
I believe there's going to be more of the terrorism. I believe that the president, I believe the UPDF will get control, but they're going to have to get to the root of the problem. They're going to have to find the root of the Islamic State and they're going to have to take them out before they end up killing any more people.
Well, they may have to go into the DRC to do that. And in the midst of these recent terror attacks, I know you're planning an evangelistic crusade for northern Uganda.
Absolutely. We're doing a crusade on December 17th, 18th, and 19th. It's the first crusade done. There's only been a few crusades the last 20 months go on. You know, it's almost like this COVID has shut down kingdom building, but it's time that we open it back up again. Now, we will have very good security. We will have police. People, we won't allow people to be bringing big bags, suitcases, or anything like that into the actual event. And
you're going to feed people there? You were telling me earlier.
Absolutely. It's going to be a 3-day event. We'll start on Friday night preaching, stop about midnight. We'll play the Jesus movie in 3 different languages all night long. Then on Saturday, we're suspecting close to 20,000 people. It's a 20-plus acre open air meeting. So we're going to feed them all on Saturday. Then we're going to go into the preaching to about midnight again, play the Jesus movie again. Sunday morning, get up. We're going to feed them all again. And then we're going to end out late Sunday afternoon.
Well, let's pray for some baptisms there, and may need some loaves and fishes there if you're expecting 20,000.
Absolutely.
Wow.
What we're doing is we took our entire rice harvest. We have a commercial farm, so we got around 70 ton of rice we'll be using. We'll be bringing about 25 big beef cows from the farm. We'll probably bring about 25 goats from the farm. We have a lot of pumpkins, sweet potatoes. I mean, we're not just feeding these people some beans and rice. Keep us in prayer.
Well, we will. And I know that regularly you feed orphan children. I know profits from the farm that you have and the truck stop business that you created in northern Uganda are being used to support the orphanages that you established. It all started with rescuing kids from the LRA. How many kids do you have now, and how are the children doing? What's their greatest need at this point?
We have about 350 kids in our care. We're feeding about 8,000 meals a day right now. We do that every day. So the ministry has really got big over the years. We have 5 working orphanages. We're very big into teaching skills and trades. God spoke to me a number of years ago and said, if you're going to just build another orphanage, stay home. Right now, we're working about 560 some people on a payroll. So these children are not, I call them children. These young adults are not working a job being trained for nothing. They're getting paid the going rate of what the people in Uganda make as well.
Okay, making a difference in Uganda. Machine gun preacher, missionary to Africa, Sam Childers. Sam, it's always good spending time with you. Thank you for being with us.
Hey. Thank you very much. God bless you all, and Merry Christmas coming up here soon.
Leftist students at Arizona State University are demanding that, quote, the murderer Kyle Rittenhouse be withdrawn from the university. Students for Socialism, Students for Justice in Palestine, and 2 other student groups are demanding administrators take action against Rittenhouse, despite the fact that a jury recently found the 18-year-old ASU student not guilty of murdering 2 rioters last year in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Well, here with more is Kevin McGarry. Mr. McGarry is chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of California and co-founder and president of Every Black Life Matters. Kevin, it's good to have you with us. Has America entered this new era now where verdicts we don't like are ignored?
When you look at the actual merits of the case, you look at the actual legitimacy of the verdict. It's unbelievable that we actually have students that are trying to call Rittenhouse a murderer. It makes me believe that these students actually did not pay attention to the case, that they actually did not, understand what, the nuances of the case. Basically, it sounds like they actually just took a look at what was said before the case, all of the media narratives, and then the outcome, and then they're driving their own conclusions based on that. But they didn't actually follow the facts of the case. I mean, it was clearly self-defense.
Kevin, in your opinion, why did all this become a racial issue when those two men that were killed by Rittenhouse were actually white, the same color as Rittenhouse? So how did that happen?
Several media entities continue to carry the narrative that Rittenhouse actually shot black men. Even up until last week, there was a couple of media publications that were saying that Rittenhouse shot black men. I mean, it's unbelievable the media malpractice and the media deceptions that were going on with this. And I'm assuming that a lot of these students are just willfully ignorant on this, and did not get involved in the nuances of the case, and are willfully being ignorant so they can drive their radical narrative on this whole thing.
So how does the teaching of critical race theory then play into all of this? What impact do you think that's having on young blacks and young impressionable white high school and college-age students?
CRT paints this narrative of white privilege, white supremacy, and you're hateful irrespective of that. Now, for us, people of faith, we know that this is completely antithetical to our faith foundations, because Jesus came to redeem all. There is no such thing as irredeemable. So people of faith should not fall into the CRT crowd at all. Because Jesus came to redeem all people, and so for people of faith, this is a non-starter. But nevertheless, it is having a profound impact on our society and culture. But the fact is that when you have CRT driving this narrative, any of these potential inflections that are happening within culture and society, and this Rittenhouse case is a perfect example, they will take any potential narrative and drive sort of this racial wedge, this divisiveness, and try to make it seem like there is a supremacy narrative here, even though all of the people involved were white. Everybody was white here in this particular incident. And so believe it or not, at the end of the day, Black Lives Matter is actually trying to protect the namesake of a felonious child predator and, domestic abuser who lost their lives by way of trying to take the life of Rittenhouse. So it was, again, Rittenhouse was acquitted on self-defense grounds, rightly so. But BLM is aligning with these guys and their families, trying to say that Rittenhouse was a supremacist, a militia, and of course an oppressor, and should not be protected. So this is where CRT comes down, right? Anybody white, anybody who is even protecting themselves legitimately is somehow having privilege. And this is, regrettably, this is where society and culture is taking us now. And unfortunately, the church, we have a lot of people in our faith communities, especially evangelicals, who have come out on the side of they were castigating Rittenhouse last year. And regrettably, they have not recanted. They have not come out and said, look, we said some things earlier on about Rittenhouse, about this trial, and we were a little bit, we came out a little bit fast because we thought we understood the case, but we regret that we said those things. They have not recanted their scurrilous statements about Rittenhouse. We need those famous people, and they know who they are, who are in our faith communities, who said these horrible things about Rittenhouse and being militia and being white supremacist and all of these things because they were kowtowing to culture and being a social justice, evangelical. They need to correct, their statements.
Kevin McGarry, co-founder and president of Every Black Life Matters. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing your perspective with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary.
Following our interview with Kevin McGarry, Arizona State University responded to student demands that Kyle Rittenhouse be withdrawn from the university. ASU says Rittenhouse is only enrolled in pre-admission online classes. He's not actually gone through the admission process. So this begs the question, if Rittenhouse applies for the nursing degree program, will ASU cave to the demands of leftist students and refuse to accept Rittenhouse as a student? Well, despite our reaction to verdicts that we like or don't like, eventually God's justice prevails. We will all stand before him in judgment. So what does God expect of us in the meantime? To love one another and forgive. I can't think of a better example than the response of congregants and family members of a pastor killed 1 year ago by a drunk driver in Bagley, Minnesota. 69-year-old Verlin Strang served as pastor of the First Baptist Church of Clearbrook for 25 years. He was killed when David Nelson rear-ended his Jeep Cherokee. Nelson reportedly drove while intoxicated, speeding 70 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. Tears flowed in the courtroom at Nelson's sentencing hearing the day before Thanksgiving. First, let's listen to Pastor Strang's daughter, Jamie, and then his widow, Mary, as they offered Nelson forgiveness.
We forgive you, Mr. Nelson. As hard as it was at first, we want you to know that we've been praying for you this past year, because we know your life has been impacted by the biggest mistake of your life.
Pastor Verlin's last sermon was about forgiveness. His congregation and family members honored him and God by doing what Christians must do. One congregant asked, "How could we not forgive when we've been forgiven so much?" Bingo, they get it. What a wonderful example for us all this Christmas season. It's something to remember, especially if we hold a grudge against a friend or have yet to forgive wrongs committed against us by a work colleague or a family member. In the book of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 20 through 22, Peter asked Jesus, "How many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus responds, "I tell you not 7 times, but 77 times. In other words, keep forgiving. So no matter the injustice or the offense against us, remember the response of those who lost their beloved father, husband, and pastor because of a drunk driver. And let's remember the sacrifice of Jesus, who died for our sins. That forgiveness is eternal." Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on the CBN News and NRB channels, social media, and our broadcast affiliates. And until next time, be blessed.